and pulled all American personnel back to the airport where they are now. The airport itself is a disaster. You undoubtedly have seen this video with thousands desperate to try and get on flights out of the country. This video shows its best. It's an American C-17. Inside are refugees and evacuees. The jet's taxiing. Hundreds of people are swarming it to cling to the side of the plane. And as the plane takes off and gains altitude, we've blurred it, but you can see people falling off the plane, falling back to the land that they so desperately tried to escape and then died when they reached Earth. Watching this video, you have to ask yourself, what would prompt people to cling to the side of a plane as it takes to the sky? And the answer is simple. Many of them worked for the U.S. military during the 20-year war. Our government promised them and their families protection. Over the past few months, we welched, and they risked falling from an airplane taking off rather than face reprisals from the Taliban. The president was silent over the weekend, came back to the White House this afternoon, and has now returned to Camp David, we're told. We're going to cover all angles on this. We'll get to the president's speech in a minute. For the politics, we have Heather Nauert. She served as the spokesperson of the State Department during the Trump administration. Glad to have her. Dave SEARS served 20 years of active military duty. He's been involved in operations in some of the darkest places and horrific conflicts in both Iraq and Afghanistan, for some insight on exactly what's happening at the airport. But first, the political storm tearing through the United States. Mike Allen, co-founder of AXIOS, with us now. Mike, we're going to get a soundbite from the president in a minute, but I summed it up at my attempt at short brevity, as you tried AXIOS better than mine. It's not my fault, but I made the right decision. Fair?
I can do you one better. I can go you even briefer, Leland. The buck stops here, but. And that was the president's message today, that he said off the top, I'm the president of the United States. The buck stops with me. But he said that President Trump had hemmed him in on the timing. He said that Afghans had hemmed him in on the evacuations, that Afghans weren't willing to fight for themselves. So behind the scenes, Leland, Axios reporters are hearing acute frustration from the Biden team about the plans that were left for them by Trump. But I think that what you did off the top was right. This left behind story is the big story. At the very least, thousands of people who work directly with American troops, with the U.S. and its allies in the war effort, at risk to themselves. And when you take in their immediate relatives, for sure, tens of thousands. And this could be interpreters, this could be drivers, this could be cooks, this could be security guards, all kinds of people who made America's massive Afghanistan machinery possible.
Yeah. Heather, I saw you sort of scoff a couple of times at some of the things that Mike reported the president saying. What part of the Trump plan did the Biden administration not follow that would have made today not happen?
Well, first of all, there's enough blame to go around here. I'm not going to defend the Trump administration, nor am I going to defend the Biden administration. Both administrations handled this poorly. Now, the way Trump would have handled it a little differently is would have let the Taliban know right out of the gate that you hurt our Americans, whether they're civilians or whether they're military, and there's going to be hell to pay for that. That's what President Trump would have done. But both administrations, in fact,
forgive me, I thought they Heather, forgive me, but I thought President Biden made that pretty clear, and certainly the State Department and the Pentagon said we have the right of self-defense, and if you fire on the people at the airport securing the airport, we're going to defend ourselves, didn't they?
Yeah, it wouldn't have gotten this far under the Trump administration. There would have been a much more orderly departure. What we're seeing, and I worked at the State Department, I've been to Afghanistan with the secretary, I've talked to folks on the ground there, military, and of course those at the State Department. And I can say we're all heartbroken to see what is happening and how this is unfolding. There have been thousands of Afghan civilians who have supported us at the embassy over the years, and the fact that they may not be able to get out, their lives are in danger. Their lives are in jeopardy. Now, what we needed was a far more regimented and orderly departure. There's nothing orderly about this. But again, I think the Trump administration was wrong, and Trump supporters aren't going to want to hear this, in trying to negotiate with these Taliban. While they were Taliban forces that were interested in peace, not these guys. These guys aren't interested in peace, and we're seeing that today.
My father always says you can't have a good deal with bad people, and you could have bad people picture of Taliban in the dictionary. Dave, what do you make of what's happening at the airport? It was chaotic. We understand, though, now they, meaning the 6,000 U.S. troops, have secured the airport. What do you make of the fact that so far there haven't been shots fired by the Taliban? We're not hearing about suicide bombers attacking the airport. We're not hearing about RPGs being shot at planes that are on the ground.
Yeah, it's still early. I mean, the Taliban's going to try to hedge. Of course, they're still unsure. They don't want to bring the full force of the United States down on them. So if you do try to engage 6,000 guys, the Taliban's going to have a big problem. So those guys are going to secure the airport. You're going to have Marine Expeditionary units in there doing what they're trained to do, a non-combatant evacuation. And if it goes south, that's going to be when the decisions get made and how far do you go in order to get those people out. And I think you go all the way. But it's a complete disaster from the beginning. It's unbelievable how big a failure this is. And the execution, I'm not talking about the idea of the withdrawal, but the execution of this was horrendous.
Yeah, well, just about a month ago, President Biden told us that the withdrawal was going to be orderly and this was going to be easy. Take a listen.
In no circumstance will you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comfortable.
That was July 8th, Mike, about 40 days ago. Is the White House worried about these sound bites that are really not going to age well?
Well, there's nothing they can do about them. They know that they have to live with them. But Leland, pull back the camera. And in my newsletter this morning, AXIOS AM, I talked about a system failure. And we have here a failure of imagination about what could have happened and how fast, of intelligence. Clearly, the president, who has access to the best intelligence in the world, just 6 weeks ago, I had a very impression. Just Thursday night, a top Biden administration official told Axios, Jonathan Swan, August 31st, which is when they'd said all the troops were going to be gone, August 31st is a long ways away. We'll use that time to get the people who have helped the U.S. Their visas. That was Thursday night. So you have a failure of intelligence and, of course, of execution. That no one would argue that whatever they intended to do was perfectly carried out over the last 48 hours.
This did not work out so well. It seems like we also had a failure of communication. This caught our eye. Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson, left, I guess, on Friday for vacation. And we know this because she put up an out-of-office email response. So when you emailed the White House spokesperson in the midst of undoubtedly the largest crisis the Biden administration has faced, you could argue the greatest foreign policy crisis the U.S. has faced in a number of years, the White House press person's out of the office, and that was Sunday.
Leland, come on. We all work from everywhere. You know that I do. I can work from Maine. You can work from the fancy places that you go. On the list of problems here, I wouldn't focus on that one.
Fair enough. Heather, though,
if I could jump in here, Leland, for a second, and Mike, I'm a huge admirer of your newsletter and what you do in your writings. However, let me say this: this wasn't a failure of intelligence. This was a failure to listen. It was a failure to listen on the part of two separate administrations. I know folks were briefed at the highest level of both administrations that this would happen rapidly, and exactly what the Taliban's plans were. They chose not to listen because they had a policy difference. They had a political difference. They wanted our troops out no matter what, and no matter what it was going to look like. Did they think it would be this bad? Perhaps not, but they were warned. I can assure you of that.
Hey, Dave, I'm interested in how things are going in terms of resources at the airport. We understand the Marines have trained for this. We understand there are contingency plans. But as Heather points out, it seems as though there was a fundamental lack of willingness to plan for things not going well that we held to be truths that were inviolate. Like, nobody bothered to think about, well, what if the Afghan military just gives up?
Yeah, right. The execution for this was terrible. And I think the blame goes all the way around. You can't absolve the Department of Defense. You can't absolve, especially the National Security Council and National Security Advisor. It's their job to push back to the president and say, look, we will execute what you want to get done. here's how we recommend that we execute it. And you could have left Bagram open, so you had a second airhead. Then you have Kabul airport. Did you know there should be HESCO barriers around it that should have been fortified? You should have food and water in place. Intelligence.
Dave, I just want to stop you for 1 second. If you ever want a picture of what American air power can do and the goodness of America, you can take a look at the picture here. This is 640 people crammed in to a C-17. Dave, I know you've spent a lot of time on C-17s. They're not comfortable, but by God, these people who helped America and did a lot for us are now on their way out of harm's way. So at least a few promises kept, or 640 promises kept. Mike, point taken in terms of saying that people work from different places and the like. But it's clear the administration was not ready for things to go as bad as they did over the weekend. And what I'm wondering is that have they hit the panic button yet for this week and saying we need all hands on deck? Or is everybody sort of saying, OK, we're going to let the military take it from here. Things are going to be just fine now?
I don't think there's anybody inside the administration who doesn't recognize the gravity of this. And that's why you saw the president coming back to the White House today, addressing the nation. And we've had top administration officials on television saying that this did happen faster than they expected. And so, that's why
Mike, quick,
I would point your viewers.
We're going to try to get the soundbite from President Biden speaking. It wasn't an it was not an Oval Office address, and it was not in prime time. Take a listen.
I stand squarely behind my decision. Mr. Ghani insisted the Afghan forces would fight, but obviously he was wrong. So I'm left again to ask of those who argue that we should stay. How many more generations of America's daughters and sons would you have me send to fight Afghanistan's civil war when Afghan troops will not? How many more lives, American lives, is it worth? How many endless rows of headstones at Arlington National Cemetery? I'm clear on my answer. I will not repeat the mistakes we've made in the past. That no amount of military force would ever deliver a stable, united, secure Afghanistan. What's happening now could just as easily happen 5 years ago or 15 years in the future, past 2 decades. I'm now the 4th American president to preside over war in Afghanistan. 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th president.
Going back to what Dave said, Mike, is there any dissension in the ranks in terms of advising the president to stay in Washington, or a discussion that there needs to be Oval Office addresses?
Leland, 3 things. First, it's prime time, and you just played the president's address, so that took care of that. Second, between the lines for viewers, is to pay attention to the difference between defending the withdrawal policy and defending the method and the reality, the execution of that withdrawal. What you just heard in that bite was defending the policy. The questions will be from both parties will be on what actually happened. And third, Leland, just pointing your viewers again to the left behind issue. The president didn't take questions today, but when the president takes questions, I guarantee you that's going to be a big part of them, and that is what is being done, has been done, will be done for the people who risked their lives for America.
One question to ask the president is that he gave an address, but he didn't take any questions. And you know who took questions? The spokespeople at the Department of Defense and at the State Department. They took the tough questions from the press. In fact, from an Afghan journalist who asked, who is the leader of our country now? What has happened here? The president wasn't willing to take those questions. The president wasn't willing to own leadership at that point. He just pushed it off to other people. And the whole notion that he would completely blame the Afghan government is just sickening to me, especially when the U.S. government negotiated with the Taliban directly and cut the government of Afghanistan out of some of those conversations as well.
Yeah. Dave, last question for you. While certainly humiliating on the world stage, the images we saw today, there hasn't been a single American so far, at least, killed in Afghanistan through this debacle. What changes that calculus, you think, or that reality?
I think it's all in the Taliban's hands now. What do they decide to do? How far do they decide to go? You know, what we overlook is that, yes, a single American has been killed, but I'm talking to my friends that are out there and they're talking to their old interpreters. You know, we have one who's worked with 9 guys. 6 of those guys are dead and unheard from, and their families are dead. So people that worked with America would go out with you, fight with you. They are being killed and they're being purged. And to think that the Taliban is not going to continue that, to try and negotiate with them, is ridiculous. I hope that the U.S. servicemen and the U.S. State Department people, citizens that are there, are able to get out safely. But I would still wait and see, and I would make sure that we have some measures in place to make sure we try and do everything we can to deter the Taliban from touching them and to respond if they do.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time American has left some of its local partners behind. Obviously, Saigon in the picture that everybody's been talking about for the past 6 days. Mike, Heather, Dave, always good to see all of you. We appreciate it.
Leland, thank you for your coverage.
All right. Now some history. There's a reason Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. We're going to take a step back and take a look at how we got to today. America helped teach the Soviets that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires in the 1980s, arming